And then to the angels who were singing that time, if you hear my crying eyes, reaching for the stars above the sky, my voice never sound like it used to. Is I can only cry for her. Can you hear my crying? Reaching for the stars above the skies. My voice will never sound like it used to do. 'Cause I can only cry for one more night. Oh, for one more night. Yeah. Oh, for one more night. Yeah. Or I can only cry for one more night. Oh, one more night. Yeah. Oh, one more night. I can only cry for one more night. Or I can only cry for one more night.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second masterclass for the day under the theme Future Proofing Women for Change. We are so excited to have you all with us today, and I'm so grateful that you made some time. Just a heads up, unfortunately, Akua was unable to physically join us here today. However, she has sent us a pre-recording. So just a little bit about Akua before I present what she has sent us. Akua is a leadership and culture advisor. She's a certified executive and leadership coach, and is recognized for learning and organizational development facilitator with experience supporting leaders across various organizations, ranging from high growth startups to multinational corporations. So without further ado, I am going to now share with you Akua's presentation. Thank you so much.
Akua and Akua. And I'm really excited today to be hosting this masterclass focused on the Google hashtag I'm remarkable content. I'm really excited to dive in today. We're going to be talking all about self-promotion and really the importance of reflecting on your own relationship with self-promotion. Throughout this session, I really want to encourage you to engage, to let me know your thoughts in the chat. And I really look forward to hearing where you are in your journey and maybe even where you want to work towards. So let's get started. All right. So once again, welcome to the workshop. A few practical things. Please mute your microphone if you are not speaking. I'd love for you to have your webcam on if possible. It's always nice to see those, people live when you are presenting. And then last but not least, please introduce yourself in the chat. I would love to know, so just pop this on the screen. So please let me know in the chat. Please share your name and where you are joining us from. I would love to know, and it's always nice to know where people are joining from. So once again, my name is Akua. I also respond to Akua and Akua, and I'm joining you from Accra, Ghana, and West Africa. So I'm a certified executive and leadership coach, learning and development facilitator, and I spend a lot of my time supporting leaders and helping them think about their own leadership process and culture. And one of the things I think that's incredibly important to having an effective culture and being an effective leader is really leveraging self-promotion. So that's where we're going to get into next. If you haven't yet, please take a second to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're joining us from once again. And really, let's get into the content. So just a quick set of ground rules just to make the most of our time together. First and foremost, I really, really would appreciate it if you would commit to staying present throughout this entire session. Please, close any other tabs, put away your phone so that you can really focus and make the most of our time together. Remember, what happens in this session stays in this session. I want everyone to feel comfortable, and I'd love for everyone to contribute. Please commit to holding a safe space for each other, and let's get into what the agenda is like today. So we've already done introductions. If you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please go ahead and do that. We'd love to know where you're calling us from and what your name is. Next, we're going to get into some reflections. And I think that this is always a really great place to start for us to really reflect on where we are within our self-promotion journey. After doing some reflections, I'm going to jump into some research. All right. And then the fourth thing we have on our agenda is a workshop exercise. So please make sure that you have a pen and a piece of paper. If you don't have a pen and piece of paper, this is the time to go get it, because we will have an exercise where you will need a pen and piece of paper. Last but not least, we're going to have a little mini discussion in the chat. And so be ready to contribute there. And I really, really want to hear your thoughts in the chat. So let's get into this. What is the hashtag I'm Remarkable initiative? Initially, it started internally at Google by two women who just so happened to be called Anna. And what the two of them realized was that a lot of women within Google didn't feel comfortable sharing their accomplishments, didn't feel comfortable talking about the things that they were contributing and the value they were adding. So they put together these workshops as a way to give women the opportunity to build their confidence and their competence in self-promotion. But what these two Annas quickly realized that it wasn't just women that had issues with their relationship with self-promotion. And so they opened up the workshop to all Google employees. And eventually it's really become a global initiative. Thousands and thousands of people around the world have had the opportunity to join a hashtag I'm Remarkable initiative session. And you are amongst some of the newest participants. People who go through this workshop report feeling incredibly inspired and motivated to support others on their self-promotion journey. Ultimately, we want to give you that safe space to start testing out some of your thoughts around self-promotion and really get clear on whether or not your current relationship with self-promotion is serving you. One of the things I always love to share as it relates to self-promotion is that it starts internally. It starts within us. And that when we feel very comfortable about our own value, it's so much easier for us to engage with others. And most importantly, to advocate for ourselves in other spaces as well. Before we move forward, I would love to hear from you in the chat. Self-promotion, when I say that word, is it something that feels positive and comfortable for you? You can let me know with a thumbs up, or you can let me know in the chat with a yes. Or when I use the word self-promotion, does it feel somewhat weird and uncomfortable? You can let me know with a thumbs down, or no, self-promotion doesn't feel great in the chat. I would love to know. And I believe that really getting clear on this, cultivating your awareness around where you are currently, is the first step in figuring out how you want to leverage and make the most of self-promotion. So now that you've had the opportunity to reflect a little bit more on where you are in your self-promotion journey, I'd love to ask everyone, why is sharing your achievements important? Let me know in the chat. I'd love to see a few come through before I start sharing some thoughts we have around why recognizing and sharing your achievements is important. Let me know in the chat. All right. There's some interesting things that really start to happen when you take the time to recognize yourself and share your achievements. The first is it's actually really great for our well-being to take the time to just check in to see where we are. There's a lot of positive benefits to taking the time to think about how far you've come, the progress that you've had. It can also be incredibly motivating, as well as building your self-confidence. When we share our accomplishments with others and we share our experiences with others, we could potentially inspire other people, and they can also learn from us as well. Last but not least, taking the time to share our achievements in the right context and in the right places can be critical to our progression and also to our growth. I'm sure a lot of what has been shared in the chat is somewhat reflective of one of these three main topics. But one of the things that always comes up as it relates to talking about self-promotion is that knowing it's important is one thing, applying it, I'm sure it can be very difficult. I know it continues to be very difficult even for me, as someone who's been running their own coaching consulting practice full-time for the last 5 years. I sometimes still get very uncomfortable sharing my achievements and talking about the value that I can add. So I'd love for all of us to take a second and reflect. And you're welcome to once again share in the chat if this is something that resonates or if there's something that you maybe want to share. Do you ever hesitate to share your achievements? And if yes, what are those specific contexts? I'm really curious. Let us know in the chat, and I hope all of you take an opportunity to go through the chat and maybe even add some replies of your own. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe get in the way of our willingness and openness to self-promotion. What is that internal dialogue that comes up for you? Earlier on, I asked you whether or not self-promotion felt like a positive or constructive thing, or whether or not self-promotion felt a bit weird and potentially negative. And this is where we get into our mindset, right? Where we get into that relationship with self-promotion. And typically there's certain things that come up for us. I'm not the type of person who self-promotes. All I need to do maybe is work hard, right? And I'll get access to those opportunities. If one of those stories resonates, or if one of those things is something maybe you told yourself, I'd love for you to let me know in the chat. What are some of the other stories or things maybe you tell yourself as it relates to leveraging self-promotion or promoting yourself? And as you start to share some of those narratives, I'd love to share some mind shifts, some things maybe that you can keep in mind to help you leverage self-promotion if that's something you would like to do. I'd like to say these mind shifts are some of my favorite parts of being part of the initiative, and I continue to use them even till today. So this first mind shift is really around that story that we tend to tell ourselves, which is that self-promotion is bragging. And I'm sure for some of you in the chat, those are maybe some of the things that have come up for you, that self-promotion feels weird, it feels like I'm bragging, and I don't want to brag, I want to be humble, right? And that's something that I also reflect on as well. But I'd love to challenge that perception and actually state that it's not bragging if it's based on facts. And I'd love to pause here and see how that lands. Let me know in the chat, how does that land? Does that resonate? How does that feel to you? And maybe even take a second to reflect on, what is your perception of bragging? And is it different from self-promotion? If you've worked so hard to accomplish a goal or make a difference in some way, why shouldn't you talk about it? From my perspective, bragging is on one end of the spectrum and self-promotion is on the other. I truly like to think of self-promotion as something that's very intentional and related to my growth and getting additional opportunities. I do think that self-promotion is context specific, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let me know in the chat. One of the things I always love to reflect on as it relates to talking about self-promotion is reflecting on some of the situations where I think that self-promotion's even celebrated. And so I'd love to see a raise of hands. You're welcome to either raise your hands in your video, or you're welcome also, of course, to use the emojis. But how many of you enjoy watching TED Talks? I'd love to see it. Yes, I see a few hands up. I love TED Talks as well. And when you think about it, at the core, TED Talks are pure self-promotion. There's someone who's talking about an amazing thing they've accomplished, something that they've overcome, and we love them. We love actually to encourage others and to celebrate others who have done amazing things. And so that's something for you to also keep in mind if one of the stories coming up for you is, this is not important enough, this isn't something I should share, or people might look at me weirdly because I've taken the time to talk about this value or this thing that I've contributed. Another thing that also comes up as it relates to thinking about self-promotion and its relationship with bragging is really just recognizing that we can't control what others think of us. We can only put our best foot forward. And sometimes we do have to just admit to ourselves that our intent might not always land. And that's okay. Not everyone will understand us. Not everyone will always want to support us. So we should just focus on our interests and our intent. And I think sometimes just move forward from that. Reflecting on this is also incredibly important for another story that we tend to tell ourselves. And this story is that I just need to work hard and someone will see my hard work. This is a story that could potentially work in some situations, but not all. I'd love to hear from you once again in the chat. Let me know if this is a story that maybe you've told yourself, and maybe even let me know whether or not this is something that has actually stopped you from getting a promotion or an additional opportunity. If you find yourself reflecting in a situation where you could leverage self-promotion to talk about something that you've done to get access to that next opportunity, climb the ladder, secure your next client, I want you to remember this mind shift. Accomplishments do not speak for themselves. And we cannot assume what others do or do not know about us. And this is, I think, a mind shift that is so important for me and in my business, because I would not be here today having this conversation with you if I hadn't taken the opportunity to put myself out there and share that I do these workshops and share that this is the type of work that I do and that these are the types of results and feedback I get for sharing this content with others. And when we think about self-promotion, something that might come up for you is, that's not something I can do, right? People are naturally good at self-promotion. I'd love to quash that thought, right? And replace it with self-promotion is a skill. And I truly think it is. Even though I am not 100% confident, always putting myself out there and self-promoting, I've gotten a lot better at it. So self-promotion is a skill. It's a muscle that needs to be strengthened. And I always recommend that you find role models and look for people within your own life and where you spend time that you think do a good job advocating for themselves and self-promoting themselves in the right context. So let's continue on and think a little bit more about why self-promotion matters. Research shows that self-promotion matters. When we are able to talk about and share the unique value of our work, both our personal and our professional lives benefit. Research shows that we can't depend on other people to understand ourselves better than us. About 50% of employees feel like their managers see them and see the work that they're contributing. And as I mentioned before, celebrating our achievements internally first has a great impact on how we feel about ourselves. So it has a great impact on our self-esteem and our motivation. So really just recognizing that research also reinforces the importance of sharing your value and advocating for yourself. But that can only begin when you take the time to be intentional and reflect on how you can make the most of self-promotion. In addition to some of these internal narratives and stories we might have around self-promotion, there are also societal impacts, environmental impacts that may or may not impact whether or not we decide to leverage self-promotion. And this is where we get into talking about identity-based stereotypes. So our own beliefs about self-promotion can be a boundary, but the responses and reactions we get from other people can also challenge our ability to self-promote. Commonly held stereotypes can influence how we perceive the competence and ability of people across many different identities. I'm sure all of you today can jump to a conclusion, tell a story, or make an assumption about what I do, where I live, maybe even how much money I make. As human beings, we are meaning-making machines. We are stereotyping machines. And we all naturally have these biases. And so it's very important that we become curious. And rather than looking at people and trying to put them into boxes and categories, that we give them an opportunity to share and that we listen to what they want to contribute and the value that they can add. And as we talk about identity-based stereotypes and unconscious bias, it's also important to note that we shouldn't impose our own self-promotion journey on others. Everyone can have a different perspective and experience with self-promotion. And this is going to be based on their culture, how they were conditioned, the family they grew up in. And so it's so important for us simply to create that safe space for them to reflect as opposed to impose where we currently are. And as we continue to think about unconscious bias, it's important to note that within any environment we work in, there's a major language or a dominant dialect. And while language can bring us together, there can also be biases that pop up based on dialect, based on accent, that can also have us jump to conclusions about a person's ability and competence. And this inclusion can come in many formats. It can include dismissing people, their thoughts, their values, ridiculing people, harassing people, feeling like they're potentially bragging, once again, based on their accent. And so this can be incredibly discouraging to others and make it so others don't feel comfortable talking about their contributions. And so it's really up to each of us, once again, to be very curious. And if we observe this happening, to bring awareness to the group that we're in about their actions. Many people might not be aware they're doing it, but because you're taking the time to go through this session, hopefully you'll be more aware and be able to point out where this could be happening. Why is it so important for us to reflect on these biases and really reflect on the things that can get in the way of us feeling comfortable talking about our contributions? It's super important because I know everyone in here is a leader and they want to be able to create that psychological safety. So by being proactively aware of our biases and intentionally disrupting them by being curious, we can support our networks and we can support others that also potentially want to improve their self-promotion skills. As you can see on here, we've shared some statistics in relation to what happens when we really lean into these biases as opposed to being curious. We miss or question achievements around us, and we create an environment where people don't feel comfortable speaking up or even stepping up. What can happen when we're inclusive? By being inclusive, we can create psychological safety, where people feel comfortable contributing and are excited and willing to show up. We could also create more innovation and foster more creativity. And those are all things that are better for our bottom line, better for our businesses, and better for our personal life. So I'd love to pause here and see if anything has come up for anyone. And if anyone has a story or something they'd love to share, you're welcome also to put that in the chat. And once again, I just encourage all of you to take a second and go through the chat and see what others have to share. All right, we're getting to my favorite part of the workshop, all right? And that's really the individual exercise. And so what I'm going to do is read out the instructions of the exercise, and then I'd love for all of you to join in. Okay, so you've heard a lot about why it's important to think about your relationship with self-promotion. Now it is time to flex your muscles. I want all of you in here to think about all the reasons why you are remarkable. What are the contributions, accomplishments, and experiences that motivate you, right? Who could learn from them, right? Or maybe even be inspired by them, right? And maybe want to build on them to move forward. I want you to think about all those things. And I know that you have many things to be proud of in both your personal and your professional life. So what we're going to be doing is writing them down in the form of statements. Each statement, okay, don't start yet. Let me finish with the instructions. Each statement should start with the words, I am remarkable because. And once again, if you have a story or narrative that pops up that says, hey, this feels like bragging, or this isn't important enough, I want you to work through it and write it down anyway. Right? I want you to think about everything that you've experienced in both your personal and professional life, every single step that has brought you to where you are today. You have plenty to be proud about So let loose. Nothing is too big or too small. But I do want you to focus on what you have done and experienced as opposed to physical attributes and compliments that other people have given you. For example, I'm remarkable because my friends say I'm really fun to be around and have a nice style. We don't want you to focus there. We want you to focus on things that, once again, you have done or experienced. I would love for you to treat this like a journaling exercise. So where you write continuously for the time given. And so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write down as many I am remarkable statements as you can. And if you, once again, if you catch yourself wondering whether or not something is remarkable, I want you to write it down anyway. Okay? And so before we get started, I do want to share 2 statements. So one personal statement, one professional statement, just to give you an idea of what it could be. Okay. And once again, there's no right or wrong answer. So I'd love to share 2 statements from one of my previous sessions. And this is something I do all the time, just to inspire you and give you an idea of what you can write. So for my personal statement, the one I wrote down, let me take a quick look. Okay. I'm remarkable because I'm a great auntie who creates time to spend with her niece. So that is my personal one. And with my professional one I have right here, I'm remarkable because I can say no and work with any clients I want around the world. Okay, so those are my 2 statements. Hopefully they've gotten you to think and maybe reflect on some of the statements that you can share. What I'm going to go ahead and do is put 5 minutes on the clock, and I'd love for you to journal for 5 minutes and write down any and every statement that relates to I am remarkable because. If you have any challenges or issues, please reach out in the chat, but we will get back to each other in 5 minutes. Let's get started now. All right, so we have about a minute left. Please finish up some of your last statements. Okay, so let's come back together. And I'd love to hear from a few of you. Let me know in the chat, how did it feel to write down these statements? How did it feel to write down the statements? Let me know in the chat. Was it easy? Was it hard? What did you find writing down the statements? Okay, I know for me, it really was difficult when I first started, but I've gotten a lot better at it now that I've done over 80 of these workshops. All right, and that's another thing I'm really proud of, right? I'm remarkable because I've done over 80 of these workshop sessions. All right, so now that we've taken the time to write down some of these statements, I'd love to push everyone a little further. I want to stretch everyone a little further, and I think this is a great opportunity to do that. Remember, this is a safe space. We won't be discussing what people are sharing with others. And so I'd love for each of you to share. So please share in the chat. I'd love for each of you to share 2 statements. Please make sure you use "I am remarkable because" before each statement. And I just want to acknowledge that this might feel really uncomfortable, but it's a really important exercise to really start to build that muscle for self-promotion. This is a judgment-free zone. And so I really want each of you to be comfortable, but I also would love for each of you to challenge yourself. So in the chat, please share at least, maximum, actually, let's say maximum 2 statements. I am remarkable statements. If you want to share one personal one and one professional one, that would be great. So go ahead and get started doing that. And as others are sharing, I hope that you take a second to read through and see what comes through as well. And maybe you'll even be inspired by something that someone shares. So if everyone can go ahead, and we'll take a minute or 2 to give everyone the opportunity to share 2 #I'm remarkable statements. And as you see them come through, I encourage you, right, wherever you are, to actually say that statement out loud and see how it feels. All right, so we've gotten some great statements so far. Thank you also very much for participating and engaging in the chat. Really, really excited to see what's coming through. So let's move on to the discussion section, right? We've had the opportunity to practice, and so I'd love for everyone to reflect. And once again, you're welcome to let me know in the chat what comes up for you. This first one here is, how was recognizing and sharing your achievements easier or harder than you thought? Okay, and how were you impacted by this exercise? Let me know in the chat. Okay, I know for me, it was very easy always to hear other people share their achievements or even listen to other people share about me on my behalf, but sharing for myself has always been something that's difficult, and I still sometimes cringe. Okay. Also, let me know in the chat, how did it feel? And this is something you can reflect on as well. How did it feel listening to people share their contributions? What did you notice? Did it feel like people were bragging? Were you inspired? Let me know in the chat. And this is also something that you can journal on as well, to really reflect on and see what's coming up for you. One of the things we always like to say within the #I'm remarkable community is that just by becoming more aware of how many times you put yourself down instead of building yourself up, you will gradually build this self-promotion money. And here's the thing, you owe it to yourself because no one knows you better than you. And as I shared previously, research shows that sharing our achievements, even with just ourselves, builds confidence and motivates us to accomplish more. So I'm sure some of you are thinking, okay, I know self-promotion is important. This was a great first exercise, but what else can we do? I got you, right? Self-promotion, like any skill, requires practice. So I'd love to share 4 additional follow-up exercises that you can keep in mind, right? And we also have a link here, as you can see, but 4 follow-up exercises you can keep in mind to continue to build your comfort and confidence in self-promotion, okay? This workshop is just the starting point on your journey, and you need to keep actively building this muscle. So first, we really recommend that you get into the habit of regularly sharing your achievements. And we think a great way to do that is actually by starting off with tracking your achievements. So a simple Google Doc, a simple Excel spreadsheet, a notebook, those are all great ways to keep track of your achievements. And as someone who keeps track of their achievements, I know how good it feels to go back and read over some of the things I've been able to accomplish over time. Number 2, we really recommend that you find people you're comfortable with to actually share your achievements out loud, because practice makes perfect. And we really think that by sharing an achievement out loud a certain day of the week, you can get a lot better at it. So you can do this with a group of friends, which is exercise number 2, or you can do it by yourself, which is practice and act number 3, where you constantly and continually review and edit your hashtag I'm Remarkable statements to make them more powerful and authentic by saying them out loud. The 4th thing we recommend that you do is set a stretch goal. It's so much easier for you to start to self-promote and see where you can self-promote by setting a goal where you can recognize that by leveraging self-promotion, you can get there. So these are just some of the follow-up exercises that we recommend. And I'd love to know from you. You can either let me know if you have your camera on with using your fingers, or you can let me know with the numbers in the chat. Are you going to start with 1, by tracking your achievements weekly, 2, by having a remarkable Wednesday or choosing another day of the week to get together with colleagues to start to talk about your achievements out loud? Are you going to start with 3, practice and act, where you are reviewing your hashtag I'm Remarkable statements? Or are you going to start with number 4 by setting a stretch goal? Let me know in the chat, right? And we really recommend that you start with 1, right? It's one step that can help you really start to build that momentum to get a lot more comfortable and confident sharing the things that you've done. So we can get so much better at self-promoting for ourselves. And we can also be advocates if we feel comfortable with our own self-promotion current relationship. We can get more comfortable encouraging those around us to recognize and share their achievements in the right context. So these are just some ideas, some ways you can be an advocate. Once again, not to impose, but to share that there may be other ways of making sure that you are advocating for yourself and getting access to the value that you deserve. So this first idea on here is attributing ideas correctly. The second idea we have for you to be an ally to create that safe environment is acknowledging the accomplishments of others. So really role modeling it so they can see what it's like. Number 3 is seek to understand. This is something that could become incredibly important as many of us work on teams, and many of us are working on teams and maybe working with people that don't sit next to us. So just trying to understand the value that each individual is adding to the overall team can go a really long way. And last but not least, but probably most importantly, and we spoke about this a bit earlier when we referred to unconscious biases, is by really examining your biases, examining the stereotypes and examining how you react to people's dialects and people's accents can really help you once again, create that safe space so people feel comfortable talking about their contributions. The next thing I'd love to invite everyone to do is to take a second to fill out our survey. Google asked all of us to provide some feedback, so you can go ahead and leverage the QR code so you can use that to quickly provide feedback. In order to provide feedback, you will also need my facilitator ID, so I will put it on the screen, and we'll also make sure that we have it in the chat as well. You will need that facilitator ID to be able to provide some feedback. Thank you so much for taking the time to fill out that feedback. I want to share a little bit more about the impact of being part of the I'm Remarkable initiative. As you can see, a lot of people around the world have had the opportunity to have access to this content. There's over 5,000 active facilitators, so over 5,000 humans like me that take the time to share this content. And it's an amazing community. Close to 50% of individuals who go through this workshop experience job growth. Over 80% feel more confident, and most importantly, more than 90% are self-promoting more often. To close us out, I'd love to share a video from the hashtag I'm Remarkable founder.
Hi, my name is Anna Viner. I'm the founder of I'm Remarkable. I wanted to say a huge thank you for taking the time and joining the I'm Remarkable workshop today. And thank you for taking the time to recognize how wonderful and unique you are. Remember, this workshop is just the first step in your journey. When you come back home, I want you to take a piece of paper and write down your accomplishments from the past 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Then stand in front of the mirror and read it out loud. Then do it with a family member or a colleague that you trust, and then book some time with your manager and share it with them. Make it a habit. Talking about your accomplishments is not easy. No one was born with that magical skill of talking about their achievements. It really takes practice. And I have one personal favor to ask. Help us spread the word. Bring I'm Remarkable to your family, to your university, to your organization. And you can do it by going to our website and signing up. And don't forget, stay remarkable.
Great video. All right.
Hi, my name is Anna Viner. Hi, my name is Anna.
To close this out, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for all your participation and engagement in the chat. So some quick closing remarks. Please spread the word. You are welcome to use the hashtag I'm Remarkable hashtag on social media. I also recommend that you promote the workshop within your organization, within your friends group, and please stay connected. I'd love to invite all of you to share links to your Instagram or your LinkedIn in the chat so that you can make sure that you stay connected to the rest of the cohort. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to join me today. I'm just going to share my LinkedIn on the screen. So my LinkedIn URL, if you'd like to stay in touch with me. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. And remember, it's not bragging if it's based on facts. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. You're more than welcome to reach out to me through email. I'll put my email in the chat as well as Akua's LinkedIn account. But thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a lovely day further. And hopefully you'll join us for our next masterclass at 1 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you.